Welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish Podcast. I'm Andy Kiriakoutis. I'm here with my co-host, as usual, Keith Glasser. Keith, how are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. Excited for our guest today. If you want to give a quick intro.
Yeah. Tonight's guest is a longtime friend of the show, first-time guest. He is a former college baseball coach, most recently the pitching coach at Brown University. He is currently the head baseball coach at Archbishop Carroll in the Philadelphia Catholic League, and also the director and co-founder of the Elite National Team. And we're happy to have Jonathan Grosse on our podcast. Jonathan, welcome.
What's up, guys? It's awesome. Excited to be on. Two good friends. Should be a fun time here.
That'll be a blast.
Looking forward to it. Before we start firing off some questions at you, you want to kind of give us a brief rundown of kind of how you got here. We've, as Keith alluded to, you've seen a bunch of different levels. College baseball player, Kutztown, coached at multiple levels. Give the listeners a little rundown.
Yeah, man. It's funny. I've kind of been to a bunch of different levels. I actually played junior college at Suffolk Community for 2 years, and then I'm going to 2 College World Series. Then went to Kutztown, played Division II, went to another Division II World Series. Then I got my start coaching. I was at York for 3 years. Spent 2 years down at Furman, which at the time was Division I school in the Southern Conference. Pretty high academic school. And then, like Keith said, I spent the last 5 years at Brown as the pitching coach. 2020, we had an opportunity, my family, to kind of move a little bit closer to home. My wife's from the Philadelphia area, and kind of sat down with my business partner at the time, and we kind of created what we call the Elite National Teams now. And then last year, I got an opportunity out of nowhere to kind of coach the high school level as well, which has been awesome at Archbishop Carroll, and kind of had our best year in a long time there last year, and not a great year this year, but kind of built off that and kind of building our program off of that, and what I would argue is probably the best league in the entire state of Pennsylvania, in the Philadelphia Catholic League. And just have a passion to kind of help kids and be around guys and put guys at the next level, and that's kind of how I ended up kind of where I'm at right now.
No, that's awesome. I think you're going to be able to shed some light on a lot of different things from a lot of different angles. I know I owe you a personal thank you for the help that you provided with one of our guys, Christian Sherrilambis, and giving him a chance to throw down in Georgia for you guys. And, that was really kind of what that opportunity is really what kind of kickstarted Christian's whole recruiting process. And I think that speaks to the kind of human you are, trying to help kids out and really looking for the best interest of these kids. So,
and we'll get to this. I think, one of the things that the three of us provide, and and I'm sure we'll get to this at some point, but one of the biggest things for me is guys that coached in college and people that you surround yourself with as a player that can help you get to the next level because they're doing it for the right reasons and probably coached in college. I'm not going to put that as an exclusive, but obviously the three of us have that as a background. But, guys that have coached in college and have a passion to help kids, they tend to work really well with each other. And I think that's a huge part of the recruiting process for a lot of players. So it's our pleasure. It was awesome. He dominated for us too, which always helps. So I can actually thank you for that side of it. So, because it got us a dub and we were closer to moving on in bracket play, but we'll just exchange handshakes on that one. So.
Absolutely. Christian's a stud. I saw him pitch a couple weeks ago. He's carving. He's doing his thing. He's going to do a good job down at Presbyterian. So
for sure.
First question is a loaded one, but it's a good one, courtesy of Coach Glasser. How do you use your experience as a former college coach and evaluator to help not only your high school players, but the players that you coach and guide for Elite National?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the biggest thing is kind of like what we kind of alluded back to a few seconds ago is just right, like the experience, kind of seeing a lot of the levels, um, that I've been at and having the opportunity. And obviously, like when you play at a level, it helps. But when you coach at a level and you kind of have a relationship with, a school and you can kind of say, hey, I can pick up the phone and call somebody, whether, it was when, Keith was at, RPI or, some of our other friends that, we're super close with. And I can say, hey, I vouch for this guy. I think the biggest part is that, when you play, for somebody that is really well respected and really well trusted, that coach can see that player in a snapshot, 1 game, 2 games, a camp setting. But when I can pick up the phone and say, hey man, like this is what I've seen for the last 6 months, 9 months, year and a half, 2 years, I think you automatically kind of, as a player, especially put yourself into another category. And it allows me to just, tell guys like, hey, like if I believe in kind of who you are as a player, and I tell our guys all the time, like, hey man, like if I truly believe in what I'm saying, and I truly believe you can play there, I have no problem picking up the phone. But I also have no problem telling you like, hey, like if I don't think that it's a fit, that, I think we should probably readjust your list or readjust kind of who we're reaching out to. And I think that's an important part of it, right? Like the honesty of like, hey, this person's super trusted. This person is, super well connected. And I'm not saying that I'm, any of those things, but I'm just saying, hey, I have a lot of relationships with a lot of those guys. Like if somebody can do that for you and say, hey, this is a guy that you should see, I think it goes a really, really, really long way.
Yeah, I think I'm more recently out than Andy. We've had this conversation before, but the idea that, you're going to be able to see every single kid that you need to see and be able to see them as much as you need to see them is not a reality. And I think as college coaches, and you rely on people that you trust
For sure.
to give you an honest to give you an honest assessment of where the kid's at, because at the end of the day, like you're with these kids day in and day out. Like you're
No
gonna
doubt.
know, is this kid, like, does he work hard, is he a good teammate, or is it he shows up and just kind of does the bare minimum. He's super talented, but there might be just a ceiling here, because when you get to the next level, you're going to have to work harder and do those types of things. So I think the honesty piece is obviously a huge one, but the being able to lean on people that you legitimately trust and respect, is huge for college coaches, just because, and especially with the rule change, like this is going to be something that is far different than anyone has kind of ever really experienced before. So now it's going to be way more of a, who do I know who knows this kid that I can, kind of rely on and lean on to get as much information as I can to see if this is going to be worth calling on August
For
1st
sure.
or come to camp and go down that road, because you're not going to be able to figure that out as early as you used to be able to do. With the old rule, you could just call. I can call
I
you
think
whenever.
it goes even more than that. I think it's like, and you've seen this guy play, and Keith, I think we've talked about it, and one of our friends recruited this guy, so I'm a little biased, but I had a guy, he went to camp. They had never seen him play. And he called me. He's like, hey, what do you got in this guy? And I'm like, yo, the motor, the day in and day out is better than probably anybody you have. Like, I coached for over 10 years. Like, this motor is through the roof. And, he called me back. He's like, hey, like, just like any coach, right? Like, they're going to nitpick a little bit about his game. And he's like, yo, we just can't get away from the motor. And I'm like, yeah, like, that's just who he is, like, day in and day out. And it's like, hey, I trust that's the, the guy he's going to show up, and like, that's going to show up whether it's, 42 and snowing or it's 85 and beautiful, like game 56 or game 1, like, that kind of stuff is stuff you really can't, maybe see in a camp setting, or maybe see even in a 1 or 2 game setting. Like you might be able to see it in a 1 or 2 game setting, but not like, you can't really know. Whereas, when we see it day in and day out over the course of, 6, 8, maybe even a year and a half, 2 seasons, it's a big deal. because that doesn't go away.
No. And I think that that's where, it's, you start, there was we've all had this conversation together. Like there's a handful of people that I trusted when I was coaching. Like
No doubt.
if you called or Soups called or Coach Beretti or Tish or, if people
Sure.
are like, especially in the high academic world, like, hey, this kid's a tad bit short for us for the Ivy League, but he wants engineering, you should get on him. Like it was you know, okay, give me his email. Like I will contact this kid today. And like you end up, we end up recruiting a lot of kids that way. And it's something that, when you have people that you trust as a college coach that have coached at those levels have, and you're right, it's not necessarily an end all be all, but like when you've seen what plays at each and every level, you understand what fits and you can project at a far better rate, in my opinion, than if you've never done it before or haven't
Sure.
done it in a very long time. And I think it's unique for, for me, I played Division 1, I coached high school through Division 1. But for you, it's even more, you played JUCO, which is something I never experienced. And like we've talked about, like JUCO's a huge, like there's really, really good baseball at the junior college level. Like go look across a bunch of rosters. Like you're going to see a bunch of JUCO guys that can flat out play. And
Sure.
it's not, people scoff at the idea of like, man, it's junior college. Like, there's some junior colleges in the state of New York that you can go play questionable Division 1 team, and we all know who they are, and they're going to roll. Like it's just,
No doubt.
it's gonna happen.
No
And
doubt.
it's the same. It's the same. Like you played at Kutztown, you went to a World Series, you pitched a phenomenal game. Like you guys would go roll
No doubt.
questionable Division 1 teams.
For sure.
Like it's the reality of like, and that's the thing that I think we struggle with sometimes in getting people to understand like the levels within the levels. Like yeah, it's Division 2 baseball, but like you get the upper echelon of Division 2 baseball, like those teams are good. Like Millersville right now, they're #1 team in the World Series. Like they
Yep.
will roll a lot of really good baseball teams.
I mean,
at the Division 1 level.
I'll even go one further, right? Like, and I'm not taking anything against Millersville, but North Greenville's the #2 overall seed in Division 2, and in the state of South Carolina, there's 3 hosts in the Division 1 regionals. North Greenville may be 3B. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. Like what? It's wild. Like, and like you said, like the divisions. And I'm sure we'll get to this, but get away from the divisions. Like if you're a kid listening to this, you're a parent listening to this, get away from the divisions. Go to the right fit. Go to the right fit with the portal, with transfers, with even more so than it was 15 years ago when I did it. Like get away from the divisions. Go where the right fit is. Go where. And somebody told me this a long time ago, and I thought it was the best thing I ever said. It was my former boss at Furman. He's like, "You're not going to be happy staying in the middle of campus. You're not going to be happy standing at shortstop." And he was dead on, because there's too much that goes into the time, the effort, the meals, everything, being away from home. If you're not happy standing, in that middle of that campus, you're not happy sitting in your dorm room every night. Like you're not going to be happy on the mound. You're not going to be at shortstop. And then next thing you know, you're going to be doing, the process again. So I know we're starting with that, but I always think that's super, super, super important.
No, it's important to cover the very important things, and the fit piece and the chasing in the divisions, I think is something that we've talked about on here before, and it does get lost a little bit, but the idea, and I think the thing that like we're trying to do, especially when having guys like you and Soups and Tish and Traz and everyone else we have, I lined up next week, we have Joe Reyna with Rochester. Like there's really good baseball being played at all 3 divisions. Like you don't have like, do not just chase the Division 1 dream and think
sure.
go play for to your point, like if you're going to go play at a Division 1 school, to say you play Division 1 baseball, and you're going to be, you can go look at all the rosters, pull them up, or all the records, pull them up. If you're going to be like 12-42, it's a long season to just get your teeth kicked in for 15, 16 weeks. Like that's not fun. You could go, that same kid probably could go to a Division 2 school wherever and compete regionally, nationally. You go to Division 3 school, same thing. But if you're just chasing I want to say I played Division One baseball, like in 10, 15 years, like, Andy and I said this, like, I don't identify as a Division One baseball player. Like, and I
No doubt.
don't know right now, honestly, Jonathan, I've said this, I don't know if I would be good enough to play Division One baseball right now.
Oh, I don't even think. I'll be honest with you. I couldn't I couldn't pitch in Millersville now. Like, are you kidding me? Like,
Right.
we were like fifth ranked team in the country. Like, but I'll never forget that run.
Right. Which is
And
like,
and the other part of it too is like, and this is my favorite part. And Keith, I know you've heard me say this. I don't know, Andy, you might have heard me say it too. I used to say this all the time when we were working at camp together. The best part, the absolute best part of baseball, number one thing is that in terms of like the amateur level, it doesn't matter where you play. You can get drafted anywhere. If you don't play at a top like 20 school, you're not going to the NBA, right? Like, there's a couple of guys, smaller school guys that play in the NFL. There is guys, Division III, Division II, small Division Ones, junior college, high school, Latin America, all playing the big leagues. It doesn't matter. You got to go somewhere where you want to play. So if you ultimately, your goal is not the Twitter post as a 17 or 18-year-old, but your ultimate goal is to play at the next level, you got to go somewhere to play. And you got to be on a field. You can't be the sixth infielder.
Yeah, my old boss at William & Mary said the most priceless commodity in college baseball is at bats and innings pitched.
No doubt.
If you don't get them, doesn't matter. Like,
don't matter.
You can go to name whatever ACC or SEC school. Great. If you can get on the field, more power to you. Like, you're probably an absolute stud. But if you go there and sit 2 years, you don't get drafted because you wear one of those uniforms. You get drafted because you play and you prove that you're able to be there. And I think you're seeing that recently with some of the draft stuff. Like, last year, I think there was 8 mid-major guys went in the first round. Like, those guys aren't first rounders if they don't play. Like, Zach Neto.
The first guy to get to the big leagues from last year's draft was Zach Neto, went to Campbell.
Yeah, and if he doesn't go to Campbell,
he was the shortstop from Campbell. He was the first one to make the big leagues from last year's draft.
Yeah, and if he doesn't go to Campbell and play for 3 years and get a chance to develop, and doesn't get into a situation where he's the third shortstop on the depth chart by default, he probably doesn't figure out how good he's going to be. Right? Sure. He's got that, it's like a little bit of a funky swing, and I'm sure that guys went and saw him and they're like, "Oh, it's not going to play because it didn't look exactly right." Well, he had a chance to develop his own way of hitting, and the dude's playing shortstop in the same lineup as Mike Trout. But if he doesn't, if he doesn't get a chance to play, Chase DeLauder from JMU is the same way. Like, he was a pitcher going into that campus. Most people don't know that. Jimmy talked about it on the podcast, but like they thought he was going to pitch for him. And then he grew 5 inches after he committed, and he came in and he was 6'5", 240 pounds, running a 6'6", and they were like, "Yeah, man, we're gonna let you hit a little bit." And it obviously worked out. But to your point, like, I don't know, things I remember the most are the people and the experience that you have, and like, if you can find the right place, like, that's what you're gonna remember anyways. And if you're good enough to play, like, doesn't matter where you are. There's too many people out there. There's too much money involved. They don't play those kind of favorites. Like, yeah, if you're a Division III player, do you probably have to prove a little bit more? Yeah, because you're gonna have to prove that you can do it at a higher level of competition. But if you're throwing nitro and you have some of the other prerequisites, like, they don't care if you wore Rochester's uniform. Like, it doesn't matter. So, yeah, I agree.
Again, it's the cool part. And again, there is a little bit of bias, and but it's the best part about this sport is that you get that opportunity, and and never mind the fact, like, what you talked about before, Keith, like, the experience of maybe going to a regional or winning a conference championship, like that experience is nothing. Like, there's nothing that you can compare to that. Like, I mean, I even told our high school guys, we played a huge conference game last year in the semifinal, and I told our guys, one of the speeches I gave, I was like, guys, like, in 20 years, nobody's going to remember if you went 2 for 3 today, or you had a huge hit, or you had you struck out looking in a big spot. But like, one of the biggest things you're going to remember, like, you guys are going to be hanging out at the beach with your kids. Like, you'll be down, in Jersey at the beach. Like, you're going to remember when we beat Newman Goretti in that 3A game, to go to the Final Four and, get there. And to win, our 3A in our league. Like nobody remembers the other stuff. Like it's that stuff that you remember more than anything. And that's the fun stuff. You know what I mean? And even if you lose, it's still the fun stuff. Like being in that moment is way more important than saying, "Hey, I'm cool because I put on a cool, Instagram or Twitter post at 17 or 18 years old that says I'm going to blank school."
Yeah. I mean, we went to the LSU regional in 05, which was awesome. Don't really remember a whole hell of a lot of it. I remember getting chirped in the bullpen by a bunch of people about how many national championships we have versus theirs, which was an A plus chirp.
Good
Um,
share. It's good share.
but then, like, my first year coaching, we were at West Alabama. We were in the regional. We were sixth in the country. I mean, our regional was West Alabama, Tampa, Florida Southern, Lynn. I think Nova Southeastern was in that, Delta State, and Valdosta State. Like, you want to talk about some really, really good baseball being played in a regional. Like, I mean,
You held it. I'll put it this way: if you held a gun to my or your head, you couldn't rank that regional 1 through 6 or 1 through 8. Like it was. I mean, right? Like you go through that list. Like, anyone can win a national championship.
yeah. And I mean, Lynn at the time, Lynn had Tommy Canley was on the Lynn team, who was pitching the big leagues with the Yankees.
Yep.
Florida
Tampa
Southern
probably had like 14 guys drafted because they seem to always have 14 guys drafted. So
Florida Southern had at least 3 dudes drafted off that team because I had coached them in the Clark Griffith League the summer before. 2 of them made it to AAA. One of them, and this was in 08, one of them at the time was like 94 to 96, which like nobody was really 94 to 96 then. Southern Arkansas.
Let's hit on that, right? Like I joke, right? Like I say all the time, like, and you know this too, right? I joke, and I'm like, I tell my high school guys this the last few weeks. I've said it a few times, and I'll say it to our travel guys too. But like, I joke, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna age myself here, guys, right? Like, 88 to 90 used to be like, yeah, like
firm.
This dude, like, all right, like he's got it going a little bit. Like 90, 92, you're like, this dude's throwing nitro. Now it's like that dudes are 88. And I'm like, yeah, like mid 80s, like just kind of run of the mill, like straight, like right hand stock righty. And I'm like, how far are we coming? Like this is wild. Like,
no, Traz talked
like,
about
I love it. I am a pitching guy, but you guys both know I'm obsessed with the base running game, and like I love the steal. Like I like a lot of other stuff, but it's wild. Like the stock 88 to 90 that's a stock righty now. It seems like he's all right. Like 88 to 90, like no problem.
Yeah, Traz talked about it a couple weeks ago. He was like, I don't know. He's like, the game is so different than when we played. Like
I did see that. Yeah, he did. Yeah, that's right.
And he's like, luckily I coach at a school where kids want to be big and physical. Like we're like, they're growing on trees here, which is amazing for us. He's like, but like hitting speed when we played was, you were that stock righty, like 85, 87, like, or, 84, 86, like you're in the ping zone. We called it. Like now, like that's 88 to 90, 91. Like, I remember seeing Avery throw in the conference tournament, like stood in the box and watched 93. And I was like, that's firm. Like, there wasn't a lot of dudes that were going to be 90, 93, and like they were just rolling dude like that,
And that's the thing too, right? Like they were talking about the SEC, the tournament, and I'm like such a baseball junkie. Like my wife gets mad because I'll watch college baseball all day. Like I don't care. It could be a Tuesday, 3:00. Like I'm locked in. Like I'll find somebody. But they're talking about in the SEC tournament, like, and they're like, yeah, like mid 90s is just a run of the mill guy, like because you see it every night. Because like even on a Tuesday, like in the 6th inning, like, like 92, 95. And I'm like, 92, 95, like, a decade ago, nobody threw 92, 95. Like maybe somebody's number one. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, a guy with like a 6.5 ERA on a Tuesday or, on Sunday in the middle innings. 92, 95 with an 80-mile-an-hour slider. And I'm like, man, game's awesome. It hasn't been better. I'll be honest with you. It hasn't been better. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, I was watching Kentucky versus Florida, and Florida was up. They were putting it on them pretty good, and it was on a Friday night. So they're down by like 7 or 8, you're not throwing
Saving
a
your
high
bullpen,
level
no doubt.
bullpen guy in that spot because you're trying to win the series. Like you're not going to run one of your dudes out there. So they got a 6'6" lefty on the mound who's ripping 87-mile-an-hour banger sliders, and that dude's not throwing important innings, which is freaking crazy.
It's, I mean,
Crazy.
it's good. It's phenomenal for the game. But it just goes to show you, like, I think one of the other things that goes to show you is just how good and how competitive it is, at that level. And one of the things, we tell our guys a lot too, like, and I think this kind of, goes to that is like, we hit on obviously don't be too big for your division or, kind of rule out a division, but like, go and watch a game, man. Go watch a really good Division III, school play. Like, we were obviously in the Philadelphia area, and like, they play, some good, really, really good Division III teams. Like, go watch Hopkins play. Go watch Swarthmore play. Go watch Catholic play. Like, this game's freaking legit, man. Like, and then maybe go see some other schools. But before you say like, hey, I can play at this school, or hey, I can play at Auburn, or hey, I can play at Kentucky, like you're saying, or even a Cook Center or Millersville, like, go and watch those games. Like, do you look the same as those kids? Do you look the same as them? Do you throw as hard? Do you run as fast? Like, all that stuff. Like, it's important because, I think a lot of times everyone's like, oh, I'm a Division II baseball player because this is what blank person told me. Go check it out. See what it looks like. Because, and I played Division II at a school that was really, really, really good, right? Like, I remember playing teams in our own conference that you're like, well, we're not getting the same kids as them because they're not nearly as good as the players that we have on our team. So, even within the divisions, right? Like mid-major, especially the Division I level. Division I level is probably even a bigger discrepancy, but some of the small levels, like, what does a top 25 Division III team look like? Like a Hopkins, a Swarthmore, Franklin and Marshall, Catholic. Like, what do they look like compared to, maybe some teams that are more towards the bottom of their conference? Because, there could be a decent sized gap. And, before you say, well, this is where I can play at, go look at it. Because, you can look at it on TV with obviously at the big levels, and especially this time of year, you can, see the ACC a lot, and the SEC, and even the Big Ten and the Big 12. But, go see some of those smaller conferences on a Sunday. Most of those schools play on Sundays anyway, and most high schools, at least I know in our area, we don't really play on Sundays. Like, go on a Sunday and just go check a game out. Especially if you live in an area of the country where there's a lot of schools. I always say between Boston and Washington, D.C., there's probably more schools than anywhere in the country in terms of like square mileage radius. If you live in one of those areas, jump in a car and just go see a game. Just go check it out. Take you 2 seconds to see online who's playing and, see what it looks like. Because, like we're talking about, like, a decade ago, 95 out of the left side wasn't pitching on a 7-run game on a Friday. They were pitching in a 1-run game on a Friday, maybe, or they were the starting Friday guy, and all of that trickles down through all the levels, all the way down to high school too. I mean, it trickles down everywhere. Like, that's just where the game has gone with training, with, specializing in, development and stuff like that. And like, it's not a bad thing. It's a great thing for our game. But it's just a reality of it. That's just a reality of it.
We've talked about it before, but even for you, like, you're going to know the Philadelphia area better than I am. But off the top of my head, I mean, you're talking about, you got St. Joe's. Who else is in there? I mean, you got St. Joe's. Westchester isn't far, right?
Yep.
You got SWAT or Sinus.
Haverford. I mean, Lehigh Lafayette's not far. I mean, even some of the Jersey schools for us, like not far. Delaware's not far. Like, I mean, like even Towson. Towson's only 90 minutes away. Like, you're talking about in Bucknell's a couple hours away. Like, there's a lot of schools. Ryder's not that far. Like, I mean, we just named off the top of my head, right, 12 schools. Like, without
across all. I mean, Westchester they've been in the World Series,
no doubt. They won a national championship twice
in the last 5-6 years. Like, they're a really good Division II program, but like just in that, we just named 8, 9 schools that you can go watch to see where you fit in,
For sure.
see what those teams look like, see what those roster sizes look like, right? Like you roll into some of these Division 2 and Division 3 schools and be like, there's like 80 dudes on that roster.
Yeah.
Like, do I want to be on a team that has 80 dudes? Like, am I going to be one of those guys that could be playing? Like there's a lot of
Right.
questions that need to get answered in the process.
It's a built-in college visit too. Like you go watch a game at Westchester. Well, not only have you gotten a chance to see really high
For
level
sure.
Division two baseball, but you're also now you got an idea for what a college campus looks like.
No
Right?
doubt.
I mean, we run into it, and you know how it works. But it's always interesting when you start talking to schools about kids and getting different opinions. Like I've definitely talked to Division two coaches who like a kid, but he's not quite good enough. And I have Division one schools who are like, that's our guy. And I think it speaks to like Millersville, Westchester, Kutztown, Seton Hill, those really good PSAC schools. They're not looking for a Division one guy. They're looking for guys who are better than what they have.
For sure.
And it's that nuance in the level to understand, what it takes to play at these different schools.
And I'll even go one step further, right? Like, and I kind of touched on this before, like with, and obviously working in the Ivy League, I had, an opportunity to kind of see a lot of different campuses, but I use my own, example all the time. Like you said, Andy, right? Like you're building in a college visit, right? Like, so for me, so Temple had baseball, obviously in 2009 when I was transferring, but I couldn't go to Temple. Like where I grew up and like how I grew, I couldn't go to take the subway or like go in the city. Like, I mean, I went to Kutztown. Have you ever been to Kutztown? Like there ain't a further place from Temple, in terms of like the city with what I went to. But that was me, like, and my best friend growing up, he went to a school where he took the subway every day. So like, I think that also goes into it, right? Like if a school is like urban setting or, more of a rural setting. And again, I'll get back to the Ivy League here in a second, but like when you get to those types of settings, certain schools are going to need certain fits. We used to tell guys all the time when I was at Brown, like, hey man, like if your list is Columbia, Brown, and Dartmouth, like we're good. Like we're good. Like we'll just move on because you have no idea like what you really, really, really want. Like, Columbia, you're in the heart of the biggest city of the world. Brown, we were kind of like the middle, kind of the middle child, like where like you were in the city, but you weren't really in the city. And then Dartmouth or Cornell, like, you're in more of a rural part. Like if those three schools are on your list, like you're just like, yo, I want to go to this kind of school. And like those types of kids, traditionally, for us at least, weren't the right type of fit. And we had kids. I mean, we had kids. I remember we had a kid that left and was like, hey, coach, he was from a rural part of the country. And he's like, coach, I went and visited somewhere else. I didn't have it on my plan to do it. I thought I was going to Brown. I thought it was a done deal. And I ended up going to blank school because it was what I needed. And I couldn't do the quote unquote suburban type of setting that you guys had at Brown where, you were still kind of in the city and it wasn't just a fit for me. And we were always fine with that. Like, I mean, Eric Soup can tell you guys, Dan, like we had a kid, he's like, hey, like I want to be in the biggest city in the world. Like this is like my dream is to be in the biggest city in the world. Perfect. Well, Providence ain't the biggest city in the world, so you're all set, dude. Like, but going to see that level and going to, like you said, like a built-in visit tied into it, that, it helps. Like you said, you're checking a lot of boxes because if you go to a school and say, there's no way I can see myself fitting into this school in terms of just not necessarily the baseball side of it, just campus setting wise, you can eliminate so many schools based off of that. And you can kind of narrow your search based off of that, and something we use with our guys all the time is like, right, like early in the process, like I always say, it's like a funnel, right? Like we want to start big and then we want to kind of start swirling down. And as we get closer to the bottom, the schools at the bottom are going to be, probably a similar type of fit, off the field in terms of campus settings, probably going to be similar in terms of how far away they are. And then obviously last piece, obviously the athletic side of it. They're probably a similar type of school baseball wise, whether it's mixed divisions or not. it's similar in terms of the type of talent that's there.
Yeah, it was one of the things we've brought up, and I brought up with some families too, is like you guys travel a ton during the summer. Like if you're a family and you're playing for Elite National and you're driving down to Georgia for the PBR event, leave a day early. Go check out a couple campuses. Like take advantage of it. Like even if there's schools that you don't really think is an option, like go drive through a campus.
For sure.
Just see what it's like because you might get onto a campus and be like, oh wow, this is really cool. That's where the conversation comes in with someone like you or someone like us. Like, hey, I visited this campus. It was awesome. Like, do you think I can play here? Well, now I don't know if you can play there, but now I have an idea of that's the kind of
Here's
school
kind
that
of
you
yeah.
like,
So
and
when we
you can start
do,
to figure some of that stuff out.
and one of the things that we do, and like obviously I'm a little biased because it's our kind of deal, but so one of the things that I think we do a really good job is we build our schedule based off of that. So like we have kids from kind of all over. And one of the things that we do is that we build our schedule based off of, hey, there's going to be 8 or 10 schools. If you wanted to stay in the area or you want to come a day or two early, you can go and visit these schools. And I know that those schools are going to be of interest. Weekend two, I know that there's going to be, an abundance of schools. We kind of build our schedule based off of that because I think that's one of the biggest things, like, and this is going off topic a little bit. When you're looking for like a travel organization or you're looking for a travel team, like one of the biggest things you should be looking for is number one, like I talked about before, is like, did they coach in college? Do they have a lot of connections in terms of not promising you anything, but promising you the truth? And then finally, like, where are the schools that you're going to be in front of? What schools are you going to be in front of? Because anyone can put together a travel team. Like, it's easy. Like, I can just be like, yeah, like, we're just going to play and we'll see what happens. But, if you want to go to a, higher academic school or you want to go to a school on the East Coast, well, you can't play 7 or 8 tournaments in Texas all summer and think you're going to get seen by schools on the East Coast. Like, you can try it, pretty risky, but now you're going to kind of have to go into that other side of like, do I need to go to like these expensive camps? Do I need to go to, who do I need to kind of get seen by? And you can look at it and say, well, all right, hey, this is kind of what I'm looking for. Maybe I'm not playing with my friends, but I'm getting exactly what I'm looking for in terms of the next level with this.
Yeah, going where coaches that you're interested in are or schools that you can play at. Like we're having that conversations with some families now, and I think it's such a good point, and it's something that if you're a parent listening to this, like something you really need to consider. Like if you're a 2024 going into this summer, going down to Hoover, if you're not a legitimate Division I player who's going to get recruited in that part of the country or by the schools who are going to fly there and recruit that event, yeah, it's cool. You get to go play against some really good competition. I get it.
No
But
doubt.
there's also Super 17 going on.
For sure.
And if you're a Northeast kid, you know as well as I do, if you got an off day that you don't have a game peg, you just drive to Diamond Nation because there's going to be games there. There's going to be 40 or 50 coaches that go through and making those kind of decisions on, yeah, do I want to chase like going down to the WWBA? Well, okay, I get it. I get the draw of it, but it's not the tournament that it used to be in terms of a lot of schools in the Northeast. They're not going down there because they're just going to go see guys that they've already seen. So they're staying in the Northeast and they're doing more homework on guys. So understanding where coaches are going to be, when they're going to be there. Is there an event that you need to go to that's a little bit more niche? We know the academic world, like making smart decisions like that is important as an individual. But to your point, finding an organization that is either building a schedule that's going to benefit you or is going to be flexible enough where you can say, hey, I'm not going to go down to the Palm Beach Classic because there's an event that I would prefer to play in with another team up here. Like having some flexibility and somebody being able to give you that honest assessment of like, hey, this is where you need to be. These are the schools that you should be trying to get in front of. Don't worry about playing and, being able to say that, the Florida coach is at your game. Unless you're the guy who can play there, it doesn't mean anything. There's no value in it. And
I said this, and
I know this selfish.
And I know this speaks for you guys too, right? Like, and I say this all the time, and we see it a lot, like where, parents will say, and obviously I hear horror stories in terms of some of the travel ball stuff that we hear, but I tell parents all the time, like when you're choosing an organization to play for, you're choosing someone to work with. And this goes back to my first point when we first started, right? Like be around people, surround yourself with people that are trusted by college coaches, right? Like go somewhere that has placed or it's as important to place a Division III player as it is a Division I player. Because 99 times out of 100, the Division I player to place, great. Like you can show up to a field, everyone knows they're a Division I player. But the organization that is pushing to you that, hey, not only have we placed guys at Holy Cross and Air Force and Columbia and San Francisco, great. But I'm more proud of the kid that came to us with no offers, that played for us, that worked with us, that is going to Franklin and Marshall, that's going to RIT, that's going to Muhlenberg, that's going to Clarkson. Because at the end of the day, those are the guys that are really, really working for you as a family and as a player. Because the Division I player, I love those guys, but at the end of the day, too, they were going to have multiple offers no matter what we did or what organization they did. How many guys can you put into Division III schools, and how proud of are you of that? Because at the end of the day, that's most players anyway. So that should be your number one focus.
That's incredibly well said. And I mean, that gets to the heart of it. Like, what are you doing it for? Right. To your point, like the kid who's going to go pitch in the ACC, like, yeah, does that kid still need help? Does he need to get talked through
No
offers?
doubt.
Does he need to talk
Yes,
through coaching
100%.
staffs and
Yes,
opportunity? Yeah. But he's probably going to get what he's looking for because he's really,
for
really
sure.
good. Yeah. And no, I perfectly said.
No, and again, it's nothing to do against the kid, that you put in the Patriot League or you put in the ACC. It has nothing to do against that. It's just how proud are you that you took the kid that had no offers, that played on a quote unquote elite travel team that had nothing and ended up with 5 Division III offers in the fall of his senior year. For me, that's kind of where I'm at. Like that's kind of what I love to do. Like that's what I love to like kind of help guys with, and obviously work with guys like you guys on it, because I know there's no ego involved, and there's a lot of ego, and I think in this game, and anyone that tells you that, hey, I can put you at this school, I would raise a huge red flag to that. Because as we've talked about tonight, and we've talked about obviously a lot of us, the three of us, and even more of us, but they're going to take our advice. They're going to watch them. They're going to evaluate them harder because we're vouching for them. But I would never, ever say that I personally put a kid in a school. If somebody's telling you that they can personally put you somewhere, I'd be very careful of that. That's all I'll say.
Well, yeah, I mean, I never worked with anybody. Shouldn't say worked with. That's not the right verbiage. I never took the opinion of somebody who told me that this kid could play for me and I should take him seriously. Like
Right.
it's like I'm going to be the one who makes the decision on whether or not this kid can play for me and is going to fit into my program. Like skill wise, maybe, but like there's so much more that goes into it, and I think there's just when going back to we say it with an asterisk whether or not like you have to be able to coach and things like that at the college level to understand what goes on. But I think when you've coached at a high level and you've had guys move on and have success at a higher level, whether it's in professional baseball, whatever, you really start to understand that like you're just a small piece in that kid's development moving forward. Like there's not a kid that I have coached who has played professional, like, and there's a lot of kids that have played for me that have played professional baseball. Like I'm not the reason that they played professional baseball. Like I may have just thrown good BP when they played for me, or said a couple things. Like sure, maybe a little bit more for some kids than others, but like I'm not the reason that has happened. Like there's no ego to the standpoint of I'm the reason that this guy got drafted. I'm the reason this guy is playing at this school. Like, no, man, like you're not. Get over yourself. You're not that important. Like, you have to put the kid first. When the kid is put first, and you can find the right fit for the kid, in getting to the school, and or once they actually get to you when you coach. And this is, I'm taking this full circle here. Like, when you coach and you get that kid, like now everything that you do for that kid is the best interest of him to become the best version of himself on your campus. All we're doing now is flipping it and being like, okay, let's find the right fit for this kid to get him to the place where these people are going to be able to make him the best version of himself once he's there. Like, we're not coaching these kids when they get there. And that's the hard part. I think but when you realize that as a coach, that it's not about you, then you start, worrying about a lot of other things that actually matter a lot more.
That's probably the bias though too for us too. This is all our best guys. I try to give to all my best friends. You might have to cut that on the record, but
But I mean, that's part of it too.
All
Is
the
like,
guys I love, I'm trying to get to my best friends. But
but
yeah, I
that's
mean,
part of it too. Is you want these kids to play for good people. Because when you play for good people, like your experience, like is different, and
for sure.
we know a lot of these guys.
And there's a and like there's unfortunately the reality is there's a lot of ugly of college baseball. That's just the reality of it. Like
Yeah.
you can go on Twitter today and you can look at what the transfer portal looks like and people getting fired and people moving on and everything else. And that's just a reality. Like there's some ugly parts of college baseball. It's not just the Twitter post, the celebration, to get to a regional. That's unfortunately not it. And there's a lot of money involved now, not only with the head coaches and the NIL stuff. Like there's a lot that has gone into this, and making the right decision and going to play for the right person, going to the right program, whether it's level, whether it's the coach, making the right decision is so important now, more than it's ever been, is choosing the right school because of the other stuff and not because it's going to look cool on Twitter, because my mom and dad are going to look cool wearing the sweatshirt at my brother's or sister's game, in a year or two.
Totally agree. I
Let me
want to
ask you
ask you.
this.
Yeah, go
Uh,
ahead, Keith.
We've touched on a lot of the stuff that we were going to talk about, but
Yeah, I know. You know me, I'm like way off. Like I started going.
Yeah.
Like
No,
you
it's
sent
fine.
me that like itinerary, and I'm like, yeah, we're good with that.
It was an outline. It's not really an itinerary.
Yeah,
I
it's
knew
all
we were
good.
going to get to all this. The one thing, and I think that, we've talked about it, and that we haven't, I think we can actually get to it a little bit better with the three of us, but like, what have you found with families and kids when they don't feel as though they're seeing the recruiting success that they feel they should because they've been really good in high school? Like having that like what is that happening? Hey, I punched 14 last night, like, but nobody wants me and I'm 82 to 83. Like,
Yeah, I think for me and kind of how I really go about it is like I'm not like, of course I want you to have success. Of course I want you to be all conference. Of course we want you to be really 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 good. But I think one of the biggest things for me is like in terms of evaluating the player is. And I obviously get a chance to see them, day in and day out, especially in the summer, where I always say, like, give me 2 weeks and I'll give you an honest opinion. Like, let me see 2 weeks worth of at-bats, 2 weeks worth of success on the mound, and then kind of give you the feedback that, not only am I going to get, but, kind of what are we getting in terms of like, what are the other coaches saying? And I'll be honest with you, I said this to families all the time. Like, I think one of the best conversations that I can have with a family, although it's not the most fun, is, hey, here's kind of the reality of what we're getting in terms of feedback. And obviously you don't have to listen, right? Like you can make your own assessment and you can be like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Those coaches don't know what they're talking about. But I think a lot of times, sometimes the conversation that you don't want to hear that, hey, this school's not interested, this school's not interested, which probably means these schools aren't going to be interested, is a huge part of the process. And I think it's probably one of the most valuable parts of this entire process, because it allows you to then take not only your time, not only your money, not only effort, all three of those together, and it allows you to focus on what actually is a reality and what's actually not a reality. And I think that's a huge part of the process in terms of, okay, yes, you struck out 58 in 30 innings, which is legit, because I don't care where you strike out 58 guys in 30 innings, it's legit. But you had a lot of success in high school, or you had a lot of success, at this level, but the results aren't translating, or the talent isn't translating to what you're looking for. I just think that's more of like a conversation of like, hey, here's the kind of the reality of the situation. Again, we can tie this all the way back to the first thing I said is be around people that you trust, and be around people that can tell you what you kind of want to hear, and be around people that will tell you the truth. And there's a lot of people that will tell you what you want to hear because you struck out 58 in 30 innings, but there's not a lot of people like the three of us that will say, hey, I know you had this success, but here is more of what the reality is in terms of the next level.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question should have been better framed into like, does high school success automatically equal college recruitment? Which I think in some regards, like, yes, it does, but it doesn't necessarily translate into, like you're saying, the exact school and level that you want to go play at. Like, when you go to college, when you're going to play baseball in college, like you're playing against, pretty much everyone in college baseball was the best player on their high school team, right?
Sure.
Like, there's only so many of them out there. So, like,
Sure.
and I've said this before, like, I love saying this, like, when you level up, I used to say this when I was coaching, when you level up, like, it doesn't get easier. Like, you don't go from high school baseball to college and be like, yeah, this is easier. And then get to pro ball and be like, it's easier here too. How have I not made it to the show yet? Like, it gets harder, like the higher the levels you go. And I think sometimes, people like you find success in high school, like that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to translate into the college game at the level at which you want to go play at.
Sure.
And I think, to your point, like that you're right. Like, that's where I think, like, the honest conversations that you have to have with people who, and you don't have to believe them, but if no one's recruiting you at that level or those schools, like, you're not, like, you can certainly go to school there and be a student, but you're likely not going to be on the baseball team.
And that's where we're like back to like, right, like if you surround yourself or you put yourself in a position to be with people that you trust that are giving you that honest assessment, like if one of the three of us tell you, hey, this is where I think it fits, like probably where it fits, and when it's all said and done, like, and even the three of us could probably argue, right, like, hey, I think you can play this school, I think you can play at that school, but we're going to be pretty darn close. And I think that's the biggest thing is that there's a lot of times when you get into that question of like, hey, what is high school success equal to college recruitment? There's a huge gap in terms of like what the reality is because of what their quote unquote high school numbers are and what the college level is. And that's just hard to like, right? Like if you play in the league I coach in, like in your first team all conference, like you ain't gonna have any issues going to play a lot of places. Are you gonna go to Clemson? I'm not telling you that, no. But are you gonna play somewhere in college? Like there is no doubt, like in my mind, you were gonna play at a really good school and you're gonna probably have a really good chance to have a lot of success. But there's also other leagues in our area that you can hit 500 or 480 and you're not going to have that same success in college because it's just different. So it just kind of depends. But again, that's where like put yourself around people, your travel ball coach, guys that can help you in terms of the advising process, like put guys around you that can see you play, watch you, look at you, give you a real evaluation. Well, they're going to give you the truth.
Yeah, I think it's always difficult when you have the disconnect from you have a kid who's getting results but the talent doesn't translate to the next level. So you get a kid who's having a ton of success being 82, 83, 84, and they see that they're having more success than the guy who's 87, 88, 89 from a numbers perspective, but the evaluation's not the same, right? And like we know that the kid who's 83, 84 is going to have a tough time pitching at the Division 1 level, right? The kid who's 87, 88, 89 is going to have a better chance. And the kid who can pitch a little bit and is really competitive in high school, he may end up putting better numbers together than the kid who's the Division 1 commit. And that's where I feel like sometimes the disconnect comes is like, well, I'm better than he is right now. Why am I not getting those looks? And then that gets into the nuance of how tall are you? How do you move? What's your breaking ball look like? Like, how hard are you going to throw? And it's not just the present evaluation, it's how is what you do physically going to translate to the program that you're going to be at. And that's where I feel like it can be difficult sometimes when you have a good player and you have to tell them like, this is going to be a stretch for you and here's why, but also not make it super negative because they're still a good player. Like you still have to be really good to go play at a good Division 3 program. You have to be a really good player, but
Yeah,
maybe
no doubt.
you're a little small or you don't run quite enough. Like, there's a lot of nuance to the evaluation that can make some of those conversations difficult.
Well, and I think you can even go on further, right? Like I think even positionally, right? Like you could just like even past the pitchers, like well, blank got recruited by blank school. He's a 6'4" outfitter. It runs a 6'6", and you're a I don't know 5'10" undersized second baseman can really hit. Well, maybe he got an opportunity quicker than you did, even if it's not in high school. Like even if it's within your travel program or like just somebody else like. There's just so much that goes into it, and there's no directs like do this and get recruited, do that and get recruited. Like and it makes it hard, and I understand sometimes the questions that parents get. Like you're sitting in the stands and you hear, oh, this is how my son got recruited, and you're like, okay, well, was he a 6'5" right-handed pitcher that threw 90, or what was he? And this might come across as crazy, but we start next weekend and we do a parent meeting, and the first thing I say to all our parents is just like, if you hear anything in the stands on how to quote unquote the perfect way to get recruited, I'm like, immediately don't listen, because they're wrong. Like there's just no direct way. Like there's no science to it in terms of getting guys recruited. It's just there's just a lot of different ways, and outside of the one thing I started with was be around people that you trust and that can you feel like can help you get you to the next level. I don't think there's anything that's a direct correlation. I mean, me and you talked about it, Andy. Like we worked together on with Christian. Like I didn't know who Christian was. I said, hey, I texted you on a random day and was like, hey, can you send me an arm? I need an arm to help us win a game. And you sent them, and you're like, hey, here he is. He's mid to upper 80s left-hander out of nowhere. I used a couple of texts that I had. You had obviously contacts that were going to be there as well. And like next thing you know, we had a bunch of different offers. Wasn't a direct science to how we did it. We just kind of worked together.
Yeah, you get schools that you think are fit. You have the conversation with the family of like, hey, here's some schools that are going to be there. Are you interested in them? And you get some guys to go there.
And remember, he visited Division 1
Christian
schools,
was awesome.
Division 2 schools. I mean, he had a ton of like, but there was no direct like, this is the perfect way to get recruited. It was just like, hey, I surrounded myself with you, Andy, who knows me, and we worked together, and we both worked kind of together. That we knew he was going to pitch at that time, and again, you kind of, and it works vice versa, right? Like, I had guys that I had reached out to Andy about if he could get me connections on, and it's not a direct do this, get recruited, get signed. There's just a lot of different variables to it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, like you touched on earlier about going and watching games, the college game is so much different than the high school game.
For sure.
And that's the driving force behind trying to get guys to actually go watch college baseball games. Like, not only to see if you fit at the level, but you have to go see how much different it actually is. See how much faster it actually is. See how much quicker these guys are. You're going to get guys running down the line that are going to be 4.2, 4.3s. Like, you're not getting that in high school. You're going to get dudes who are going to be, upper 90s, triple digits exit velos. You're not getting that in high school games all the time. You're going to get guys who throw the baseball really, really hard with breaking stuff that you think that you can handle and you haven't seen yet, really. Maybe the one guy that you faced in summer, a year ago, who's committed to name the SEC school. But, you're going to see 3-4 guys that can do that. And it's, understanding that the game is the college game is so much different, that college coaches are projecting you into their game. They're not looking at you and saying like, okay, like, yeah, he's good for this level, so he's going to be good for my level. Like, they're trying to take what you do and see if it's going to play at their level. And if they don't think it's going to play at your level, then they're going to pass. And that's fine. That doesn't mean you can't play college baseball. It just means like, hey, you know what? Maybe I can't pitch it in the A10. I'm going to have to go somewhere else. Or maybe I'm not going to be pitching Division I baseball, but I can go play Division III baseball and be pretty successful. So it's I think that's something that I think kind of gets glossed over when we talk about, like, hey, you should go see games and see what it looks like. Like, yeah, man, anyone can watch the ACC network or the SEC network. Like, I'm the same way. I watch it all the time. Like, and you're seeing dudes roll out there like 92, 95. Like, if you're 81 to 83 and you're a senior in high school, like, the chances of you pitching in the ACC or the SEC is about zero. And that's just the reality. But it's understanding that, like, coaches are trying to fit your skill set into the game that they are currently coaching. And then within that, like, the program that they run.
For sure. And I think that's one of the things too, is like, people forget all the time, is like, oh, well, I got interest from, blank school. Well, like, when I was at Brown, we would only recruit long, skinny infielders. Well, you guys had Tish on the other day. He wants short, little guys who got fast motors. So even within the conference, right, you're going, well, I can play in the Ivy League. Well, maybe not, because that school doesn't think you're a fit because of blank. And obviously, we know, and our relationships know, like, okay, well, if they're saying this is not the reason it's a fit, well, this school may actually be a fit because they actually don't value that. But each individual, and that was kind of my point before with, like, if somebody's telling you an absolute on quote unquote how to get recruited, there's so many different ways to get recruited, because everybody, not only Division I, II, and III, not only conference to conference, but program to program, value different things more. You can't run a sub 6.8. You can play for certain teams in the SoCon. I can tell you that. Like, if but there's teams in the SoCon that if you run a 7.4, you can play there.
Right. Well, I mean, Datoma's a perfect example, and I'll just say it because, like, he's spoken at the convention on base running. Like, he's huge on base running. He loves steel. Like, he wants guys that are fast. Like, if you're going to be he's not recruiting a ton of bangers that are just going to run 7.4s and try to flip balls out of the yard left and right. Like, it's not going to happen. So it's there's so much more that goes into it.
And I sent them a guy. He's going next year, and one of their favorite things when I told him was like, yeah, when he gets on first base, all he wants to do is run.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, all he wants to do is run. Yeah, we kind of, we're good.
Right. It's amazing.
And it's just, there's just no exact science, and everybody's going to have pros and cons on every player. Like, I don't care, like, outside of Dylan Cruz going to LSU, like, I mean, who's going to be a first-round pick out of high school, like, everybody's got, well, he swings and misses too much. Well, he doesn't run enough. Everyone's going to have a certain thing that they don't love, but they're always going to go back to the thing they do love. And if you can do that really, really, really well, and it doesn't matter, it can be program to program, conference to conference, doesn't matter. If you can do that thing, they will overlook the stuff that they don't think that you're that good at, and they will take you.
Yep. And to your point, I think some of that inside baseball are about understanding what programs like.
For
If
sure.
you can help guide a kid, like, certain guys, from a pitching perspective, if you can't really spin the ball, I can't call.
For
Like
sure.
like that's just what they value. And like to your point,
Yeah.
certain guys are looking for certain frames. They're looking for guys who do certain things at certain positions, and having some of that information helps. And it is always interesting. And we've had these conversations, Grosse, about some guys like you'll have just a spectrum of evaluations for the same kid. And it just speaks to you could have 10 schools and you're going to get 10 different evaluations.
No doubt.
And there's going to be crossover of things that they think a kid does really good, like maybe he's got some juice or he's got a really good arm or whatever it is. But each coach is going to nitpick at a slightly different thing, and they're going to like something about the kid that another program didn't like. And that's that's the art of it, is that if it was that simple, like, you just everybody in the Ivy League would just recruit the same kid all the time. But
For
like
sure.
Penn likes a little bit of a different player than Brown does, and Brown likes a different player than Tisch does. Like if
And
you're
one
a
of the things
left-handed
that I
hitter, you
think
might
that
get on Columbia's radar because they love dudes who hit left-handed.
for sure, and at Brown, it doesn't. Who cares if you hit left hand? You want to hit right handed at Brown. So yeah, one's always falling out the left. Like, but but I think that's goes back to right. Like, it's like knowing. Like, I know when I call certain coaches, what's the first question out of their mouth? Like, hey, here's the velo. Well, what's the breaking ball velo? Hey, how many times can he throw for a strike? Hey, what does he run? Like, knowing that stuff is the science and kind of the intricate part of the subjective really part of this entire thing, which is it's entirely subjective, to be honest with you. Part of the recruiting process is completely subjective, is knowing, hey, what guys can I call if this is a strength, if this is a strength, or if that is a strength? Because I can call a guy and say, I can call blank friend and say, hey, he's 85 to 90. It's legit. He's 6'5". He's physical. And if he says, well, how many times does he throw it for, his breaking ball for a strike? And I go, well, he's like 50-50. I know he doesn't care what anything else I said was. But if I go, hey, he's a little bit undersized, his velo's a little bit short, but he spins it like like he can spin it in the big leagues. Ooh, all right. When's he gonna pitch? I'll come out and see him. And again, like, same thing with the running speed and the arm strength and all that other stuff. Like, hey, he can really, really, really run. I think he's a good defender. I think he might have to move to second base or might have to move to center field. That's all right. Let me know, but he can really hit. Well, let me know when he's playing. I will come out and see him.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of this whole thing is that that's the subjective part that when you sit in the stands as a parent, unfortunately, you don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's always a hard thing because sometimes the answer isn't that straightforward. Like sometimes it's just like, hey man, he's not going to be a fit. And it's like, well, why? It's like, well, because you don't really fit what they do. It doesn't mean that you're not good enough to play there. And in a lot of cases, that's not the case. You just like if you look at some of these rosters, like you look at Old Dominion, like if you're not big and physical, you don't really fit there. Like that's what they recruit to, and that's an important part of why they're good. Same thing with, you look at UVA. There's a reason that all their infielders, if you ghosted out their faces, you wouldn't be able to tell who was who. They all look the same, and there's a reason. It's because they recruit to a very specific type of player, and if track it over time, there's a reason they do it. It's because those guys have success at that level. Certain traits, certain body types, certain guys who move certain ways. Like if you have a track record of success with a specific type of guy, like if you're an evaluator, you're going to gravitate to a guy that you've had a ton of success with. Like it's just that simple. But certainly not cut and dry. Want to ask you one more question here, Jonathan, before we sign off, and I think this is an important one, and you deal with it quite a bit with parents. Um, but if you could shed some light on like the role of a parent in the recruiting process, and like maybe some of the things that you speak to your parents in your organization and your high school team about, what their role should be, what it shouldn't be, as they go through the process with their kids.
Yeah, it's and that's a tricky one too. And I hate to just kind of not give like straight answers here with some of the stuff we talked about, but um, obviously you want to be there, you want to help, you want to allow them to have opportunities to get recruited, um, but you also don't want to be so overboard that it becomes a red flag. And I think that's the tricky thing, to kind of navigate as a parent, right? Like, hey, we're, and I know I'm sure you guys do the same thing. Like, I know I'm guilty. Like, hey, get a bunch of video, get, live video, of them hitting and pitching in game. And, where you want them to do that, but you also kind of want to, let, the coaches do their jobs, I would say. And I think the biggest thing to do is focus on your son, their process, and not worry about who's in the stands, how are you trying to influence where they're going to go, and just allowing them and the process to kind of come to them. And if you're with the right people, let them take you and give you the questions and the answers that you're going to need in terms of making the right decision for them going forward. Coaches don't want to be interrupted by you asking what their velo is in the stands. They don't want you to go up to them and introduce themselves. Hey, I'm so-and-so's dad, especially like when, a coach is specifically there to see a player, right? They don't want that. Let them do their job. Let them sit and evaluate. But also do your job as a parent in terms of getting video, being supportive of them to have success, but not pushing the envelope in terms of making sure that they're going to get recruited by blank school. And I think that goes for, and obviously that was, I kind of hit on the evaluation process, but even the visit, the questions within the visit, no coach is ever going to say it's a red flag if you have a financial aid question or you have a, money question on in the process. But you asking all the questions on a visit is a huge red flag because it shows that you're interested in the school and not him. If you're interested in, how he's going to have academic success, fine, no problem. You're going to, like I said, the financial aid stuff, the money stuff, nobody's going to have a question about that. But you pressing on development and how are you going to treat my son and where is he going to play, stuff like that are all major, major, major red flags. Let him go through the process and you help him. And I know it's hard because I'm a dad too. Help them with, providing them the ability to get the exposure that they need, getting the, being in front of the right schools, and then kind of sit back and kind of let it happen. And put yourself in front of people and surround yourself with people that will help with the other stuff. And I think it'll all work out.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful advice for any parents that are listening. Yeah, I'm not a parent. You two are both fathers. Jonathan, multiple times over.
Yeah.
And and I can only imagine, but I think that's some really good advice.
That's the thing, man. It's like, of course you want the best for your kids. Like, mine are little and you want the best for them, but letting the kind of process play out and not getting in the way can be a huge part of it, as opposed to being majorly involved and being a complete red flag.
I always thought when people would sit in my office when mom and dad started using we, like that was always
Yep.
the start of the I don't know who's more interested in this. Is the kid interested in it, or mom and dad, like, we think this, we like this, we think this about this. Like, well, like, said this before in here, like, I've never written a lineup in my coaching career with a parent's name on it. Like, you're never going to play for me. So like, I'm not really interested in what you want. I'm more interested in what your son, who I'm hoping wants to come play for me, and if he doesn't, that's fine. But like, though that was always the start of it for me. Like, well, we like, My mom used to say, "Who, with you and the mouse in your pocket? Like, I'm not recruiting you. I'm recruiting your son. So let me hear from him."
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that's like, if you do get a question, and I think sometimes like parents will get nervous about like asking questions about things that is important to them and like financial aid and don't be scared of that stuff. But I think the minute you start talking about player development and where do you see my son fitting in, like stuff like that, and like Keith said, like when you start using we, it's too hard, man. It's too hard. It's if you don't want it that bad and you can't ask a question, it's too hard.
And look, they're like, when you're, especially if it's like your first or second visit, like everyone's nervous. Nobody really knows how to,
Of
what
course,
to do.
yeah,
Like no one's ever really going to, you know, write you off because you can tell that people are nervous. They don't know what's going on. Like, no one's going to get mad. There's not going to be red flags that fly up if you've asked questions to other programs and then you forgot to ask one and your mom's like, oh well, hey, you've asked the other coaches this question, like, oh yeah, what about this? Like, it's not a red flag. Like the red flag you're talking about is like every single question's coming from mom or dad. Every single thing is
or there's
stuff.
more interest on like the visit from mom and dad about like what's going on, and
Yes.
you're just standing in the back, not worried about it.
Right. But like the financial aid stuff, like mom and dad are
Yeah,
always going to have questions about that, and you should,
for
unless
sure.
this is the ninth time you've gone through this, like you should have some questions on this, like, and that's fine. No one's going to get mad about that. Or like, what support systems are in place? Do you have academic people who travel on the
Sure.
road? Like, yeah, sure, ask away on those questions. But we get a lot of those academic questions in the academic world. I don't know how much we got those questions when I was at West Alabama, but we digress.
Well, with that, Jonathan, I want to give you a second to give some shout outs to your organization, for the people that are listening, where they might be able to follow you. Obviously, we brought you on here because you do an awesome job for a lot of people, and um, really really excited that you're able to join tonight. So
No, I appreciate you guys having me on. I mean, um, we're at Instagram, Twitter at Elite National _2. Um, I'll be reposting a bunch of some videos and stuff like that. I'm sure you guys will see it on there. And but I appreciate what you guys do for for me and as friends, and even more so than anything as kind of boys and everything else like that. And I think like I hit on earlier, just putting yourself with people that you really really trust, like the two of you guys. I consider some of my best friends in the entire world, and I can send a text about, hey, I don't know this person, but I think he went to Marist, and I'm like, I got a connection to Marist better than anyone in the entire world. I did that with you the other day, Andy. I'm like, yo, this dude's
Jimmy
a red
Bidner.
flag. It's like, what's this guy about? No, but you know what I mean? Like, I just think in this, in this business, even in college coaching, the private sector we're all in right now, like, put yourself with people that you trust. I'm not saying it has to be somebody that coached in college, but I'm a little biased, and I think that a lot of the guys that did coach in college do it for the right reasons and are doing it for to help kids and are doing it for the right reasons. So I appreciate everything you guys are doing and appreciate you having me on, and roll Pats, baby.
Yeah, baby, Archbishop, get it done. Well, thanks everybody for listening. As usual, thank you again, Jonathan. You can follow us on Instagram, EMD Baseball, Twitter, EMD Baseball. You can find us on the interwebs, www.emdbaseball.com. Feel free to follow questions, and we'll sign off for tonight. Thanks, everybody.